This is Jessica.
And this is Lewis.
We have a preschooler and a toddler. Our children are a different kind of perfect. This is a show about surviving parenthood throughout raising children with special needs, while keeping ourselves and our sanity intact. This is FUBAR, Surviving Parenthood with Special Needs Kids. In this episode, we discuss attempting to keep friends, finding time to see friends, and coming up with discussion topics that are not related to children. Spoiler alert, Jess is not good at this. So, Lewis, first I wanted to talk about today, how did family and friends react when we told them that our children had special needs? So, related to Alex specifically, I found that both of our families were quite surprised, actually, but they were really sad for him and worried about his outcome. But I felt that both sides were really supportive. As far as Benji, I found that Lewis's parents were really accepting and supportive, although they didn't quite know what autism was or what made Benji quote-unquote autistic. Granted, this is understandable because they hadn't really had exposure to autism before, so they wouldn't have a reason to know really what autism was or what it quote-unquote looked like. They were really respectful of our choices and our wishes, so I really appreciated that. My family was supportive of getting him tested, but we're honestly really surprised that he was diagnosed with autism, and we're a little bit suspicious of this diagnosis. I feel like they tried their best to be supportive, but they kept saying things that they thought were supportive, but that I didn't really feel were supportive, like, we know what you're going through, or it could be worse. To me, it felt invalidating, unsupportive, and honestly a little bit judgmental. What was your experience, Lewis?
Well, with my family, with Benji, I tried keeping him in the loop, and they suspected something. They didn't seem to be too surprised, but they knew that there was something up, but he reminded them of me a lot, so they weren't sure if it was just like neurotypical behavior, just a little on the extreme end or what. But when I finally revealed it, they sounded like understanding and upset, but they know he's thankfully on the end of the spectrum where at least he can have something of a decent productive life and everything. So thankfully for that. Regarding Alex, it was a bit, I think, of a surprise when I mentioned that there was like the suspicion of things like cerebral palsy and such back during the cloudier times before we had more information. And they were certainly upset and everything and concerned. I would say very much so. Dad, I remember reaching out and saying, if you ever need us, let us know and everything. I'm so sorry to hear this. And so, I feel like they tried to be supportive.
What about your friends? Have you told your friends that the children have special needs?
A few of them. The friends back up in where I grew up, I told a few of them. They sounded like supportive in the sense, like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that or something. But, that's really about it. I haven't really had many discussions or haven't visited them or seen them in so long. It's kind of a brief texts every now and then. I haven't had really any significant deep conversations with any friends for a while.
So for me, when I told my friends about Alex, they were really sad and very supportive of us getting him treatment and anything that we needed, although they didn't really quite know what this would mean for him. But to be honest, none of us did. For Benji, it was a totally different story. So my friends were really surprised about this diagnosis, and most of them didn't believe that he had autism, since he was verbal at the time of the diagnosis, and he was really sweet. He can be really well behaved and not aggressive, especially when he doesn't know you, and if you see him in a large group. Sometimes he's really reserved because loud noises hurt his ears, so he clings to us. A friend of mine who's also a psychologist didn't believe the diagnosis, and she still doesn't believe the diagnosis because he's so conversational. But Benji is someone you really need to spend a little bit of time around to see the signs, which really truly are there. He's had the diagnosis confirmed 2 to 3 times after the original diagnosis, and they were all consistent with the original diagnosis. I felt really hurt and invalidated, as my friend told me I was hyperbolizing his symptoms and being really dramatic about it. I guess that's why he was picked up by PT and OT, has 30 hours a week of ABA, plus early intervention services. They are hyperbolizing his symptoms too. And his ABA tech, getting constantly hit, is a shared delusion. Sure. Lewis, how did your coworkers react?
Well, I haven't given them the full details per se, except maybe, well, one of them, yeah. I'm kind of private regarding in the workplace, regarding my personal life, unless it's something I feel relevant. I don't, I'm very closed off. I really don't like to reveal too many personal details to them. So unless I had to, where one of them kind of reached out asking like how I was doing, and I kind of just kind of vented to them one day, and they were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." So I was like, "Yeah." So at least one of them kind of knows. The other ones, they know that like I have to take them to certain therapies and this and that, but they haven't really probed questions, and I just haven't told them. So I'm just glad that they've put up with me for as long as they have.
When I told my coworkers about Alex, they were really supportive, but they felt uncomfortable, so they tended to avoid the subject. It was a little bit different with Benji. When I told them that he was on the spectrum, they're like, "Oh," and then they moved on. A few were really supportive, especially those who have family members with special needs, but I think most of them felt uncomfortable and avoided talking about it. It really felt kind of unsupportive and invalidating. However, I do want to say my bosses were super amazing and supportive, and I am so grateful for them. They have just been absolutely wonderful. One coworker said to me one day, "Oh, is your kid one of those that you might have to lock your bedroom door at night because you worry he might kill you in your sleep?" When I told her that Benji was sometimes aggressive, to say I was upset was an understatement. So now on to parent friends. First, do we have any? I have a few. I mean, technically, there are a bunch of people that I used to know well who have friends, but life kind of sent us in different directions. So we really just kept in touch on Facebook and more rarely than anything. But I still like them. There are some friends who just live too far away to really keep in contact with other than Facebook. So I have about 4 parent friends who I currently actually attempt to keep in touch with on a regular basis, although very recently we've made 2 more parent friends, which has been amazing and we'll talk about a little bit later. What about you, Lewis?
Well, most of the friends I have growing up, as far as I'm aware, are not parents, or at least the friends I've kept in contact with. And I don't really have close friends where we are now. We have acquaintances and everything, and I know a lot of acquaintances who have children. Some of them, many children, but that's really all I got.
So for me, the parent friends that I have, 2 are people that I grew up with. One I met through grad school, and one I met at my previous job. I really haven't made many friends since the kids were diagnosed. Life has just been too crazy, and once people realize that my kids have different needs, they tend to slowly slip away. Plus, with the amount of times that we spend on therapies and such, there really isn't much time to find new friends. So, old versus new friends. I would really love new parent friends, especially those who have special needs kids, but I've really had trouble making them. I feel like I'm boring as a parent, and honestly as a person. Plus, I have a weird sense of humor that I feel like a lot of people don't get right away. My old friends are friends no matter what because they've known me forever. We can share more about anything, and they really seem to get whatever it is. And we also have more of a history and a common ground, so it's easier to find non-kid related things to talk about. So as far as new friends, we just made 2 new friends, which have been wonderful. So one of them has a few kids who have special needs, one of which hasn't been diagnosed, so we're not quite sure if he has special needs, but both of the parents have worked in the child with special needs world, and we've been able to swap resources, especially with getting diagnosis, getting treatment, getting funding, and even ways to get necessities around the house for a much more reasonable price. The other friend we met, actually both of these friends we met through Benji's school, and we found that another friend has a daughter who has autism, who she and Benji had a really good time playing with each other this past summer, so we actually had our first play date a few weeks ago, and it went really, really well. They played in the same room as each other, and they enjoyed being in the same room as each other, and it was wonderful. And the babies, they have a baby, we have a baby-ish, and they played together, and it was just wonderful. And to find people who were in a similar situation to us who actually got it was amazing. And we didn't have to avoid the topic. We could talk about whatever we wanted to talk about, special needs or otherwise. And it was so freeing. So freeing. The other thing I want to talk about before I ask Lewis about old versus new friends for you is the first parent friend that I just talked about. She told us about this Special Olympics, essentially sports program that is going on in our area. It's an 8-week program where they teach kids, I think from like 2 to 8, how to throw and catch and kick. And I was a little hesitant at first because when I hear 8 weeks, I'm like, oh, well, we have to attend the whole time. It's going to be super structured. If you don't follow what they tell you to do, you're going to get in trouble. You have to be there the whole time. Your kid has to behave. And I was like, I don't really think that's going to happen. But my kid loves their kid. They've been close since they were 1. So I'm like, all right, let's check it out. So we went today, and it was so amazing. I literally almost cried. There were kids of all needs, of all ages. It was semi-structured, so part of the time it was unstructured and the kids did whatever they wanted to do, whether it was kind of sit in their parents' lap or climb on things or jump or roll around. And the other half of the time it was structured, but about 50% of the kids were doing whatever they wanted to do anyway. And it was amazing. Alex had a blast rolling around and playing, and he was running back and forth with the big kids, even though he just learned to walk like a week ago. Benji liked playing with his friend, and he liked jumping, and he liked running. But when it got too overwhelming, he sat in my lap, and that was fine. And nobody told us what to do, and nobody said, oh, you're doing it wrong. Everyone was super supportive. Everyone was at all ends of the different needs. Nobody was looking at anybody funny. Everyone was super accepting of all of the kids and super inclusive of all of the kids. And it just, my heart swelled 3 sizes that day. It just made me feel so amazing that both of my kids could feel completely included and completely accepted for this hour. And it was just amazing. And to also know that these are parents who get it. So I could actually just walk up to any of these parents and start a conversation, and they wouldn't just be like, I don't think I want to talk about this, and walk away. It was an incredible experience.
Yeah, I had a great time there too. I mean, I didn't get cardiomegaly or anything out of it, but it certainly was great to great to see the kids having so much fun together, and seeing even like there's a young child that looked like she had, I don't know, cerebral palsy or something, couldn't use like her legs, but her dad had her up on one of the big cushions or whatever they're called, mats, and she's rolling around and just squealing with delight. And it's beautiful just seeing these kids able to just be kids in their own way. And it seemed like everybody was being very, there's no judgment or anything there. Like everybody's like in the same boat with their own kid with their own needs, and everybody's just there. And it just felt very comfortable, if that makes any sense.
Piggybacking off of the adorable little girl who was in the wheelchair, her sister was so supportive of her and spent the whole time playing with her and giggling with her, and they would race. And the people who were in charge of this organization, they made sure that anything that they did was something that girl could be included in. So they made sure that the obstacle course was something she could go through with her wheelchair, and that things were spread apart enough that she could weave in and out with her wheelchair. And it was wonderful. Like, people got it and they actually cared. And it was absolutely wonderful. And there were lots of kids who had different sensory needs, and it was totally fine. It was absolutely wonderful. And I'm just so grateful, and we will definitely be going back. So as I mentioned, 2 of our new friends, well, both the mom and the dad, their kids do have special needs. I only have 2 other friends who I know have special needs. One hasn't formally been diagnosed with autism yet, but they're getting him tested for autism. And then I have another friend from middle school and high school who her son just got diagnosed with autism earlier this week. Selfishly, it's made it a lot easier to talk with them more frequently because we all need support and we all have so many questions to ask each other and a lot of resources to share. So I found it insanely helpful, and I would never wish for anyone to have children who have special needs, but it's been really helpful to have those people that I've known forever and ever, and it's strengthening our friendship, and I feel like we're closer because of it. Lewis, how often do you keep in touch with your friends, whether they have children with special needs or no children at all?
I'm lucky if once every few months. I really, I might text them every so often, and sometimes it takes them a few weeks to get back to me, or months, and then sometimes it's same on my end. I kind of forget that they texted me, and then conversation kind of goes for a bit, and I don't know if we're just all so busy with our own life or what, but that's just the reality I have. Yes, it sounds very bleak.
Welcome to the special needs world. For me, before the children got diagnosed, I would see friends a couple times a month, more for one of the friends. But now I keep in touch with some of my friends a few times a week. But of course, we have kids, so it's mostly via text. But it's been really helpful just because we ask each other questions and we've been supporting each other, which we really, really need. I've been trying to do more get-togethers, but that's more like one total get-together per month if possible. I'm totally up for more, but it's been really tough. Due to the aggression of Benji, we don't really stay home on the weekends ever because it just leads to physical harm to either us or to Alex. So we're always a bit out and about on weekends for safety purposes. So we're up for it and we travel, but it's different for my friends, so it can be really hard to schedule. Their schedules are different. Sometimes they're overscheduled. Sometimes the kids are sick. Sometimes they just can't travel, and it just doesn't work out. So it usually takes about 3 months and 2 to 3 tries before a play date actually sticks. But at least one sticks. Lewis, how often do you see your friends?
The last time I saw any of my close friends was my brother's birthday, and before that was probably Benji's second birthday. I saw a few of them, and that's it. That's probably the most recent time I've seen seen them, really. So that was, yeah, it's been a long time.
For me, usually it's a couple times a year, maybe. I wish more. One lives across the country, so we Skype usually 1 or 2 times a year, depending on how close I am to a nervous breakdown. But a couple of them I'm starting to see more frequently just because we need it and we just haven't seen each other in a long time. So I usually only see my friends when kids are around. None of us live within an hour from the other, unfortunately, so it's super hard and honestly expensive to find a babysitter, and since we all work, we don't see our kids as much as we want to anyway. Plus, our kids get along pretty well anyway, so that helps, and we can call it a play date as well. I am able to go to lunch once or twice a month with one of my friends, which has been wonderful and super helpful, especially since we're both going through similar things. We've been close for like 21 years. God, that makes me feel old. So it's been really good to catch up and have support without the equivalent of 1 billion, 4 children around. Lewis, when you do get the opportunity to see your friends, what do you usually do with them?
I don't ever, like I said, the last time I saw most of my friends was at Benji's birthday party, and they just kind of sat around and chatted the little time I had while I was going around making sure everybody had coffee and everything else. And my brother's birthday, where I saw a couple of them, not many, and that's really it. So we just chat and we say we'd like to see each other again sometime, and I'm like, yep, that'll probably be when we're retired, maybe. And that's the sad reality.
As I said, with my one friend, we just go to lunch. When we do have kids and it's a play date, we go to fairs or children's places like children's museums, and sometimes we go to somebody's house. We try to avoid going to other people's houses due to breaking of other people's belongings and aggression, which is less in public due to distractions, so that's helpful. So we don't really go to people's houses often. However, I'm just a giant kid, and I love the kids' places, so honestly, it's fun for me. Plus, the kids can play on their own while us parents talk, but mostly we watch the kids because, again, 4 kids equals a billion children. Lewis, when you're with other parent friends in particular, what do you usually talk with them about?
Well, what do we talk about? I try to talk about, anything anybody would want to talk about. I mean, a lot of the parent friends like recently are relatively newer in my life, so we don't probably know as much about each other. So it's a lot of breaking the ice, things like, all right, what's going on with work, or this is a cool house, and kids walking around doing something like Benji was walking around with a stick, calling it a soil auger, and I was there with a parent friend commenting on that and kind of just shooting the shit. That's about what we've done recently. I'd like to be able to talk about movies and things of that. Just haven't gotten to any of those stages with anybody of late.
For me, I mostly talk about kids, whether it's my kids or their kids. Talk about behaviors, therapies, testing, school, IEPs, finances, resources, and how angry we are with the system in general as far as treating our kids, getting resources, and people just not getting it. Sometimes, if we're lucky, we talk about like TV shows and stuff that we're doing, but it always circles back around to kids. Lewis, when you're with the parent friends, especially the ones that we most recently made friends with, do you bring up the topic of special needs, or do you tend to avoid discussing that?
I don't actively try to avoid the topic of special needs per se. If it comes up or something, then I'm fine with talking about it, but I just try to act like a regular person. I mean, if someone has a question, or if I have a question about what are they doing for their child or something, if they have special needs, then, or even not, then so be it. Just talking. I don't like to specifically bring it up like on. I guess I try to be natural about it in conversation. I don't want it to be the only thing that's discussed or any kind of friendship is identified with per se, because I feel like it should be more than that. And sometimes I'd like to just kind of pretend kids don't exist just for a little bit, or like just focus on something else. I'm not trying to sound unsentimental or anything. Just sometimes I just like to just chat about whatever.
For me, I can't help but bring up the special needs. I always do. I can't seem to keep my mouth shut. It's really kind of all I can think about these days, and I desperately need the support because I don't have much and no one wants to hear about it, so I vomit it all out in the hopes that they'll pretend to at least listen to me. At this point, they can even pretend I'm happy with that. I don't tend to hold back on what I say, and I don't tend to avoid certain topics. I probably should, but I don't. I can't really seem to stop myself. I know it turns people off and people get uncomfortable, or at some point people just don't want to hear about it. But to be honest, I have to think about every word that comes out of my mouth with the kids and at work all day, and I just don't have the energy, the desire, or the ability to care about that when it comes to friends. They can either tell me to shut up or pretend to listen. I don't really care. I can't be on 100% of the time. It drains the life from me. I should pretend things are okay, or maybe I shouldn't. I honestly don't know. I don't avoid certain topics, and I'm just done doing the socially acceptable thing. So, Lewis, I'll speak for me since I know you've had trouble finding time to spend with friends, especially since you didn't mention this, but your friends live pretty far away, so it makes it even harder for you to see them. For a long time, I didn't have time for friends, but then I kept having these weekly mini nervous breakdowns that you've heard me mention a lot, where I felt like I couldn't function or cope anymore, and I realized that I absolutely had to make time for these people somehow, somewhere. Once a month or so, I'll take an actual lunch break at work to get lunch with my friends. I always work through lunch and sometimes forget to eat, so this is actually a nice treat for me. I've been trying to text friends a few days a week, which is becoming more doable, especially if I do it while walking from one place to another. Otherwise, we have to fit in the time on the weekends, either in our established plans or theirs, or if we plan it from scratch, it takes about 3 months. It's really not easy. I never had the time for a half a day or so to actually go hang out with a friend. I don't even know if I've done that in the last 4 years. Lewis, do your friends ever reach out to you?
No.
Fair enough. The 4 that I mentioned do, but nobody else does. For everyone else, at some point, they usually just fall away, and I only see them on social media and then not again in person. It's really sad because I really like these people, but it just never seems to work out, especially since none of them have children with special needs, so we just kind of go in separate directions. So we're trying to make new parent friends because we like people and we would like to have friends and we would like to see friends more often. So I'm in a lot of Facebook groups, but thus far that hasn't extended into real life friendships, but hopefully it will since I'm in some local parenting Facebook groups. I try to make friends with my kids' friends' parents or anyone else at school, especially if they have children with different needs, but it's been really hard. Mostly it's having a few conversations at a birthday party, but I would love for it to extend further. There are a couple of parents that I've been seeing in Alex's class who I really like, and even though their children don't have special needs, I've really enjoyed talking with them when I see them. So I'm hoping that will extend to seeing them outside of school, but for most of those parents, it hasn't yet. But to be fair, the school year really just started, so that's fair. Lewis, do you have anything else to add on this subject? And now it's time for fails, nails, and comical tales. All right, for my fail, this happened, I want to say earlier in this school year. So last summer, I think it was last summer, 2018, there was a camp orientation for parents. And the camp that we sent them to, which is actually their school, was very strict about what you could and couldn't bring. It had to all be healthy foods and dairy foods and nut-free and. And some of the parents eventually wanted to send like a juice box or a fruit leather or cookies or chips or something for the kids because kids are kids. They don't just want broccoli and an apple. So this one mom was getting kind of riled up because she really wanted to parent her child and be in charge of what the child ate rather than people dictating what she wanted. So she kind of got into it with the director. And to be honest, I really appreciated it because up until that time, the only other parents that I'd seen were kind of the prim and proper, perfect parent people, which wasn't me. So I felt like I was a complete mess as a mom. Fast forward to a month or two ago when I saw that mom again. And I went up to her and I said, "Were you at that orientation last summer?" She's like, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, I remembered you. I just wanted to thank you for speaking up because it made me feel more normal and less like a hot mess." And then I realized what I said to her and how I essentially said she's a hot mess and more so of a hot mess than I am. So it made me feel better about myself because I'm not as big of a screw up as she was. So I thanked her profusely and I apologized profusely. Because I felt so bad about how much I inadvertently insulted her, and I didn't mean to, and I meant to thank her, but it just went to shit. What about you, Lewis?
Well, with me and Benji, I've been having, well, as he describes, I've been using potty talk, basically. I keep saying things like poopy head or something. I'm trying to like hold back from swearing and saying, shit or something. And somehow he got into his head that like that's not for talking out in the world. It's for like butts or any of that should be talked about in like the bathroom. So I'll say like poopy or something, and he'll like just kind of slam his like hand down like that's potty talk, Abba. And it's pretty funny.
It's really sweet. He's so literal. So he thinks that we can only say things like poopy or butt or any of that in the bathroom. So if it's out of the bathroom, he gets really upset because it's not the proper place. So I realized this the other day when we were in the bathroom and he was like, but. I'm like, honey, that's not appropriate. He's like, but it's bathroom talk and we're in the bathroom. I said, touche. For my nails, I bought the kids fruit leathers, and it's kind of like a fruit roll-up thing, but healthier, and they love it. And Alex is a good eater, but Benji not so much. As you've heard, it can take an hour and a half per meal some days. So to have him eat something, especially something portable, like he can eat it in the car and we could pregame dinner, it's pretty exciting. So I'm pretty proud of that.
For my nail, I think I nailed getting Benji to go to a school in the days he didn't want to go. a couple times lately. I'm like, all right, we're going out the door, time to go. And he says, no. So I have to kind of basically figure out what he's fixated on and somehow plant the idea or kind of guide him where it can kind of follow into going in the car. I have to either make a suggestion of like, okay, well, we're going to see this on the way. Or I tell him like, oh, go bring your machine with you. Because sometimes he'll call one of his toys his like work truck or something. I don't know, somehow I have to kind of assess the situation and get him to go. And usually it works.
Just to let you know, we kind of use camp and school interchangeably. So last year, Benji went to camp where he's going to school now. He previously went to a different actual school, and for reasons that we'll get into, that we've gone into a little bit in the past, but we'll get into more in the future, we had to pull him from school in late January and switch to where he is now. However, he didn't want to go here for school. He only wanted to go to camp there, and he wanted to call the other place school. So wouldn't you know, camp started in February. So it's been camp ever since February 2019, because then he will attend. If you call it school, he will not go.
I disagree. I call it school to him all the time, and he hasn't corrected me once. Or I'm just digging an early grave.
No. So I told him at the end of summer that this year, after camp, he will be going to school there. So he thinks he went to camp from February until the end of August, and now he goes to school. But sometimes he calls it camp, so that's why it's pretty much interchangeable.
Ah, okay. I got you now.
As far as comical tales, this one was awesome. When we go to therapies, up until a couple weeks ago, unfortunately, since we don't have a million people to drive the kids back and forth, Benji had an hour and a half wait from when we got to therapy until his therapy actually started, because Alex had 2 back-to-back therapies. This is really tough for any kid to wait, especially without a lot of toys, let alone a kid who has ADHD and autism and who's a preschooler. So, as I said earlier, he's pretty social, so he likes to make friends with all the kids there. So they were chasing each other and running around, and eventually it was their time to go back for therapy. So he said, okay, I'll chase myself, and proceeded to spend the next 45 minutes chasing himself.
For me, I guess it was with Alex. It's just really funny. He likes to make us laugh, so I started kind of just rolling him around, like on the ground at the gym place we were at, and he was loving it. And then when I stopped, he started to like try to do it himself, and it was pretty funny watching him try to roll his body up an incline and not really get anywhere. But he was just like watching me the whole time, like kind of like, watch me, I'm doing silly stuff, and like cracking up. And I don't know, it was really cute, and I thought it was pretty funny.
Now it's time for us to share a self-care hack of the week, where we share what helped us survive. Okay, Lewis, tell me, what self-care tool got you through this week?
Okay, so self-care. So this is something I discovered recently. There's this gray rabbit named Bugs. What you do is he'll ask you if you want any lumps in your drink, and you tell him, yeah, I'd like to have 2 lumps. And what he does is he pulls out his giant wooden hammer, mallet, I guess you would call it. He smashes you over the head twice with it to make 2 lumps on your head. Usually it knocks you out for a couple hours. It's really relaxing.
Does he ask you if you'd like 1 lump or 2?
Oh, yeah, he does. That's why I'm sorry. Yeah, he asks you if... we screwed up my story.
Okay, what's your actual self-care for the week?
Oh, okay. Recently, I've been watching these, this will sound childish, Dragon Ball Z abridged videos, these parodies of the cartoon. And it's very nostalgic and also really funny because they're really self-aware about how ridiculous the filler was in that series, and how some plot elements or some character behaviors might not make sense, or like, well, why didn't he just do this and jump out of the way, or use a Kamehameha or this? And for me, I thought it's really funny. I kind of binge watched the whole thing and started rewatching some of them again just because I just, their caricatures of these characters are just hilarious.
So for me, I've really needed massages really, really bad. So as you've heard me mention, I have chronic pain and a lot of stress. So massages are really helpful, but I haven't had time for an hour-long massage or really the much longer ones that I need, nor have I had the money. What I do have is a mall 10-15 minutes away from where I work, and occasionally I get out a little teeny bit early before I go get the kids, and I'm able to get a 15 or 20 minute massage at one of those mall massage places. And if I don't have that much time, they do have those massage chairs that I can sit in for 10 minutes. And it makes a huge difference, especially I'm having a really, really, really crappy day and feel like I'm about to have one of those mini nervous breakdowns. That can make a difference between one of those and actually having an okay day. So I try to get them at least once a month, but it really varies. And sometimes I'm lucky and I get 2 a month, which is amazing. The other thing is they're a lot less expensive than going to a professional place. And you can just go and say, oh, I just want my feet done or just my neck. And it's really nice to get something like that done if I have the time, which I'll take them once a month or twice a month. That's way more than I was getting before. So I'm pretty happy with that. All right, that's it for our show. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. Well, that's it for our show. To find out more about the show, please go to www.fubarpod.com. Check us out on Facebook with our FUBAR Surviving Parenthood with Special Needs Kids group and on Twitter at FUBARPod. If you like our show, please click on subscribe and help us out by giving us 5 stars on iTunes or wherever you find our podcasts. And leave us a review so other like-minded parents can find out what you like about us and discover their community in which to survive and thrive. See you next time on FUBAR, Surviving Parenthood with Special Needs Kids.